Welcome, friends. Come and sit a spell as I share one of my many stories of my haunted life. In a state many, many miles away from where I live now, in a time long, long ago. This story is one of many events that took place at this home. A home that, when we inquired about the house, the realtor told us the house had been on the market off and on for over the years. No one ever could manage to keep up with the taxes, and it would end up back in the state's hand and back on the market. And people always seemed to just up and vanish, leaving most of their possessions behind. And he and his wife would go in, clean it up, to make it presentable to the buyers. On December 1st, we moved in after the sale was complete and we had keys in our hands. Lots of things needed to be fixed, but it was livable and so much better than living in a camper as we were doing at that time. It wasn't long before we had all seen the same thing. An older man, dressed in a blue checkered flannel shirt, bib overalls, trudging up the driveway. His old-time cap on his head reminded me of a railroader's cap, the blue and white striped caps. His arms were at his sides, and it was obvious whatever he was carrying was heavy. Every time we saw him, we would jump up, go out to look either at the window or the back door, expecting him to come around the corner of the house, but he never did. This went on for some time, and it became a daily occurrence. Many times, because we were busy or not looking, we would see him coming from the upper part of the backyard of the property, still carrying something in both hands, but his load seemed to be less of a burden. And as always, we would get up, and he would be gone, vanished in thin air. My kids were not all used to the realm of the spirit world yet at this point. My oldest two were, but my 5-year-old was still learning to understand about spirits and the reality that she too possessed this gift. A gift it had passed down to all 3 of my kids. Call it a gift, call it a curse, what you will, but it's better to teach them than to have them not understand what they are seeing, hearing, feeling, and why spirits come to them, and who to trust, and to set boundaries. So it hadn't taken only a couple of times for all of us to realize we had a guest. Well, technically, we were his guest, and we were now sharing his space. We learned after a while that if you stayed put, didn't get up, we could watch the farmer come up the driveway, carrying his heavy load, come across the back of the house, up across the backyard, and disappear in the wooded area at the far right upper corner of the yard. Short time later, the man would reappear and trace his steps back down across the yard, across down the driveway, and disappear by the old-fashioned rosebush that surrounded the elm tree at the end of the driveway that is no longer there. But when a strange thing was, you never saw him from the waist down, not even when he crossed the lawn. After a pretty rough winter, the first winter there, full of crazy ice storms, tons of snow that would fall, then thaw in one day, then a polar vortex froze it overnight, causing even more problems than we had before, as everything was in the basement and was now frozen in a solid block of ice. By the time spring came and we started exploring, we decided to see where the farmer went to, so the kids and I would follow the path he took. What we found was amazing. There was the remains of an old, fallen down chicken coop, one that had been fairly big at one time, the kind that had a big door, big enough to go in, not like some that you see these days that look more like rabbit huts. And there were the remains of an old fallen down pen, tangled now with vines and small trees growing everywhere. Old rotting metal stakes and wood fence posts were visible every so often. And it made perfect sense. The farmer that we saw on an almost daily basis was carrying chicken feed and water to his chicken coop and returning with eggs. This is a prime example of a residual haunting. The farmer was going about his normal daily task of feeding his chickens, just as he had done every day, probably for many, many years. This is where this part of the story ends. But this is only one chapter of many of chapters that include this house. The spirits that roam this house, the farmer who never entered the house, was just one soul that was attached to this place. And I call this place a house because, after all, I don't know if anyone has yet been able to stay here and make it a home. Because along with the farmer, there was what we had considered to be the farmer's wife. We assumed she was, as she was in this house, as he was on the outside of it. But the two spirits were as different as night and day. Where he was a quiet soul, she made sure we knew she was there and that she was the lady of the house. And her obsession was our daughters. But that was a whole another story for another time. A much longer story of curiosity that turned into fear. So for now, I leave you with this little story of the farmer. And I hope you enjoyed this little story. And I want to thank my friend Cindy of Cindy's Place and Burning Sands Exploration for sharing her story of the spirit that was at her house when she was moving in. And that was a wonderful story. If you haven't heard it yet, please go to her channel and give it a watch and a listen and say hi. And I'd like to also invite you to share a story with all of us about something spooky or haunting, scary, something strange or unexplained that may have happened to you. And I would love to hear your story, whether you do a video or if you share a little bit of it in the comments. Everyone, I hope that you all have a most absolutely wonderful day. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I will be doing some more of these stories on and off. And I want to tell everyone to have a wonderful day, stay safe, and I will talk to each of you down in the comments below. Leave me a comment and hit that thumbs up so YouTube will notice the video a little more. And I know that YouTube has been unsubscribing people and not sending out notifications, so check and make sure. Love y'all. Bye.